In today's video, we are going to give a full breakdown of the Yu Yu Hakusho Netflix show trailer that was recently released by, as you would have guessed, Netflix, as complicated as it would have been to guess that. And of course, if you haven't seen the trailer yet, this would be very difficult for you to follow the video because I'm going to go scene by scene and point out 30 key pictures that give direct details about what we're going to see in the show. So if you haven't seen it yet, slow down whatever device you're using to watch this video to 25% right now. And of course, I'm allowed to do this because I'm showing the trailer for commentary purposes and I'm not just reproducing it. So the first image that we see in the trailer is a bunch of emergency workers getting on top of a truck, which is a direct reference to what we see in the original Yu Yu Hakusho, where there was a kid that was going to be squished, but Yusuke sacrificed his life to save him. Now, there was no sign of the kid, so we don't know if the show changed it where he didn't give his life for a kid, or if he died to save somebody else, or if he just got hit. That has to be explained with further detail, but we can see that his initial death in the series stays exactly the same. Now, when we look at this next image here, we can see Yusuke kind of just looking off like he's not sure of what's going on, because this is clearly the ghost form of Yusuke, and he's seeing the emergency workers in the background, so he's trying to understand what's happening to his life. And you can also see him standing right next to the emergency workers as a ghost once again, but they don't recognize him because he's obviously dead, and he's looking at something on the ground, which when you look closer is actually pretty graphic. This scene shows a lot of blood all over his face, which was way more graphic than what we originally saw in the original Yu Yu Hakusho anime. And of course, the Yu Yu Hakusho anime did not shy away from showing blood and gore on its characters all the time. So this is a good sign to show that they're not going to pull their punches back in terms of showing violence. Now, when we move on here, once we're starting to see that Yusuke's realizing that he's dead, so he asks the question, am I dead? And the next time that we see Yusuke, we see him on top of a tower in Japan, and he's just kind of looking at the city. Now, the thing that hasn't been clarified here is whether or not Yusuke is capable of flying in his ghost form, because he was capable of doing that when he died in the Yu Yu Hakusho anime, but so far from what we've seen in this trailer, he's always been grounded, so we kind of have to ask ourselves, well, how did he get up there? Did he climb because he's still, like, physically grounded to the rules of the earth? We don't know that, but it would be interesting to see if Yusuke can levitate and fly like he did in the actual anime. Now, when we get to the next scene, we see Yusuke with Botan on a boat as they're traveling the River Styx, because Botan is literally the Grim Reaper, even though she's a beautiful young girl, which was what was originally supposed to be shown in the original series. And the way that Yusuke gets to King Yeba is extremely different from how we see it in the Yu Yu Hakusho anime, where there is no river that they're crossing. They kind of just end up there via Botan's powers, I guess you could say. But it is cool to see this original kind of old school classic way of going to the afterlife. Now, when we see this next image here, we can see Botan off to the side looking at Yusuke. I'm not gonna lie to you, this is kind of funny because Botan doesn't look anywhere near what she looked like in the anime version, where she looks like a white American girl with blue hair, kind of similar to Bulma, but, you know, obviously if they're trying to make this Japanese-based, this is the best that you can do, and I think that, you know, at least including some of these classic events is good enough for the show itself. So then we get to the point where Yusuke is directly interacting with Koenma Jr., the son of Enma Dayao, the deity that judges people in the afterlife, which is the same exact deity that, if you watch Dragon Ball, King Yama is based off of. They're the same god in Japanese lore, effectively. And you can also see on Junior's forehead, they have the whole symbol for him being Junior, and he also has the pacifier. So all of these references are tying up pretty well, and it does kind of bring up a really interesting question of whether or not we're actually going to see Lord Enma himself in this, or if he just gonna be like a character that's mentioned but we never actually get to see him. And as a post-edit, it's important to point out that we do not see Koenma in his baby form, which we saw him for the majority of the Yu Yu Hakusho series. Now when we move on to another interesting scene here, we see a building that is on fire. And if you look based off of the images that we see for the core cast, you can see Kuwabara looking at it with two of his goons that, you know, Kuwabara had like his own gang. And we also see like a demonic Yusuke kind of character here. Now, this guy's wearing very similar clothes to Yusuke, but it's clearly not supposed to be Yusuke, so they engage in a fight, and this is one of the weird things about this trailer because this is not directly in the show, but it is interesting to know like what this whole demon zombie kind of character is, because Koenma is putting Yusuke through a bunch of trials, and obviously they're changing the trials for the Netflix show. Now moving on, we get a chance to see Kurama, and as you can see, he has his rose in his hand, and we can see that he's throwing this rose towards Karasu, which is interesting because they're not fighting in a dark tournament. It looks like they're kind of fighting in some underground factory or something like that. So it's going to be interesting to figure out how they're changing the plot to incorporate Team Toguro in this situation. But as you can see, they do have Kurama and his classic Rose Whip once again, which is obviously his iconic move throughout the entire show. But it is important to point out that we don't see Kurama in his demon form, which is something that the show might be hiding from us, or maybe he just doesn't transform into his Yoko Kurama state. Which then takes us to Hiei, who is capable of transforming somewhat in this, because he doesn't have like the green skin and all of the eyes all over his body, but this version of Hiei, as you can zoom in really carefully, does have the eye over his head, and we see him, like, fighting in the background right here. Now, we also get a chance to see Bui resurface himself. Hiei gets hit over to the side, which once again shows that they're fighting in some type of underground factory or some abandoned area where nobody's really around, but it's not like a hosted tournament with other demons fighting against each other, which I think is going to piss off some fans because people obviously wanted to see a demon tournament, which something that happened with One Piece too. With when you're trying to condense a story into such a small size, you gotta make some cuts. So we see this other scene here where Kuwabara, with an extremely hilarious facial expression, is powering up his spirit sword, so they're staying iconic to their techniques. The only iconic technique that we haven't seen, and this is kind of a spoiler for another character, but we haven't seen Hiei's Dragon of the Darkness Flame, which obviously is his most iconic move throughout the entire show, and I'm pretty sure we're probably gonna get that. That's his most iconic move in the entire show, and if you get rid of that, it's like you're literally making Hiei worthless. Or he doesn't have the cool factor in his epic ultimate move that he's supposed to have. Now, we get a chance to see here that Yusuke is interacting with Keiko. So he says, "I realize there are people who believe in me." And as you can see here, this is Keiko. Yusuke's touching her face, but she obviously can't feel him because he's dead. So she's going to have to go through the little trials to bring Yusuke back to life the same way that it was in the anime version. And, of course, this is interesting seeing that they are going to give Yusuke the same love interest that he had in the original show. Now, this character in the background appears to be Gokui. Gokui, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Gokui. He was one of the demons that originally showed up with Hiei and Kurama when Yusuke was trying to extract those key items, which is the key reason as to why Yusuke met Kurama and Hiei in the first place. And Gokui is trying to kill Yusuke as he's actually in a car here. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of write him into the story. He's not a major character, but that's a very, very, very quiet reference that you have to pay very close attention to find this one here. Now, we get another scene here where we see Kuwabara running from some crazy-looking demonic-type creature. I have no idea, guys, what this is supposed to be. I'm just gonna be brutally honest with you. But clearly, Kuwabara is isolated from the others for whatever reason, and he's running from this thing. And he doesn't seem to be holding a spirit sword in his hand. It looks like he's kind of holding like a pole, so this is something that we're gonna have to find out. If you guys can find a reference for this thing here, by all means, but this is something that I don't know. It just looks like this was created for the show. Now, we also get a chance to see Keiko running here. Now, the thing about this scene is based off of the clothing of this character in the background. It's very hard to identify her face. But this could actually be Yukina instead of Botan, because Botan doesn't usually wear this and have this outfit, but at the same time though, it could be Yukina or Keiko running from something specifically. There were scenes where Keiko was with Botan in the anime, so in all likelihood it might just be a different outfit for Botan, but the show might rewrite this and include Yukina into the story, which is obviously a very important character because she's Hiei's sister and also somebody that Kuwabara is madly in love with. And upon further analysis, when you look at another scene here and you can actually see the blue-haired character from behind, and of course I don't mean it like that, we can confirm even more that it's Yukina. Now moving on here, we get a chance to see Sakio, who is a multi-billionaire and the leader, or shall we say the owner of Team Togoro. And as we can see in the background here, he's giving a mission to Togoro and his brother. Now, as you guys would remember from the show, Togoro, the bigger brother, is actually the little brother, and the older brother is actually the smaller brother physically. That's kind of how that whole Togoro brothers thing works, and they did keep that direct reference to both of them where, like, the older brother would always be on Togoro's back. And also Togoro is supposed to be a large menacing character, so this is extremely fitting here too. Now, one thing that we're going to have to find out in the show is they're going to have to rewrite the show to not have a tournament in a traditional setting, but the setup to how this actually happens is going to be left up for question. Now, when we move on to this image here, we get a chance to look at Genkai, and she's clearly an older woman, which is accurate, and it would be interesting to find out if she's going to go into her younger, more attractive state during all of this, but this once again brings up a lot of questions of what's going to happen to Rando and that tournament, what's going to happen to the Saint Beast arc, is the Saint Beast arc going to be skipped? Based off of the pacing of this show, I believe that all of the initial things are going to be heavily condensed to really focus on the Togoro part, because the Togoro part is really going to get fans watching, and if there's going to be a future season after this, it's probably going to focus on Sensui and then even the Demon King's arc. So as a result of this, I think the Saint Beast arc is going to get the short end of the stick. When we move on here, we get a chance to see Yusuke powering up his spirit gun, which is, of course, as I was hinting at before, his iconic technique. So 3 of the 4 characters do have all of their iconic techniques, which is extremely necessary for the show. And we can see Genkai in the background training him, which is good to show that there are going to be training sequences and they're not going to really like skip a lot of the core things of character building throughout all of this. And also, when we look at the final battle between Togoro and what we're about to see here, Togoro's provoking whoever he's fighting. And then when we see in the next image, we can see Yusuke, Hiei, and Kurama all rushing Togoro, with Kurama trapping him with his rose whip and Yusuke and Hiei fighting against them all as well. Now, this is clearly a major change because Togoro is fighting all 3 of them at once. There's no Kuwabara. If you go back to the original show, when Togoro initially fought against Kuwabara and Yusuke, he really just fought Yusuke and Kuwabara, where they teamed up and Kuwabara used his spirit sword to impale Togoro. But if this is a tournament setting, because obviously Togoro has his Togoro team members here, this is going to bring up a question of, well, are the others too weak to fight against Togoro and they all kind of have to gang up on him? But then this also brings up a question of, where's Kuwabara? Is Kuwabara dead? Is Kuwabara injured? Because in the original anime, Kuwabara quote-unquote died to bring out Yusuke's true power, even though he wasn't actually really dead, but it was all an act to help Yusuke bring out his true abilities. So as a result of it, there's a lot of things that are going to have to be explained here, and the show is clearly rewriting this a lot because Togoro is supposed to fight Yusuke one-on-one in the final battle, and only Yusuke and Kuwabara in the initial fight. And as we can see in this final image here, Yusuke, Kurama, and Hiei are all fighting Togoro. So overall, guys, this has been our breakdown of the Yu Yu Hakusho Netflix show. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys.